Greetings, class. In this installment, we're going to address the question of how does human nature relate to conflict? Um, we have certain ideas where we think about there being fundamental characteristics of humans, and there's three primary theories that we're going to look at in kind of mulling this over. Um, Up front, let me say, uh, one theory says that humans are good, one theory says that humans are evil, and the other says that humans are born neither good nor evil, but that good and evil are societal constructs. In the take of humans as good, what we have is the idea that everyone has an innate sense of right and wrong, that we have this moral consciousness, and that it tells us what we should do if we listen to it. This idea of human nature indicates that in conflicts, people have shared sentimentalities, shared understandings, and shared appreciation for morality. All people being good. We know right from wrong. We can appeal to that. So if you believe that you're dealing in conflict with somebody that you think is good, whether or not you think all people are good, if you're dealing with somebody that you believe to be good in conflict, that will influence your behaviors towards this individual. I think that's great, right? It's kind of like questions about trust. We should engage with people that we feel like we can trust differently than the people that we feel like we can't trust. So if you're dealing with someone you believe to be good, you can take more risks, right? If you trust someone, you can share more. Sometimes if you don't trust someone, being honest with them is something that you might be cautious about, because that could be used against you, or may take advantage of you. I wouldn't want to encourage students or anyone else to just automatically be trusting of all people all of the time. But if you fundamentally believe that people are good, and you believe that the person you're dealing with is good, you shouldn't feel as cautious about um, taking risks in efforts to reach mutually satisfying outcomes and agreements. Um, but you should be thoughtful about how much risk you're willing to take. But again, if you believe that a person is good, then you should not treat them as a way in terms of being something that you should be on guard. If people are fundamentally evil, on the other hand, our chances for positive outcomes are diminished, right? We don't trust that people will do things. And that might actually be the case, right? Again, it's not a question of are all people good or are all people evil, although you might have strong feelings one way or the other. Um, if you believe that the specific person you're dealing with is not a person to be trusted, not a person who acts with a kind of moral compass that's consistent with your experience of goodness in the world, that their consciousness does not appear to incorporate doing good for others, but only doing good for themselves. Um, that should be part of your calculus, right? Um, but here's the thing. Um, we do know things about how to build trust. Right? Trust is built when we make and keep agreements. If you're dealing with someone that you're not sure about, or if you're dealing with someone whom you believe is probably a bit on the evil side, there are steps you can take. One, make sure you get everything in writing. Make sure it's very clear, and make sure that there's very concise details, right? This can be done with or without a mediator. If you detail the agreement, the terms of the agreement, the consequences for doing the agreement, and especially if you have mechanisms for enforcing the agreement, right? You're very well covered for the risk that you're taking, right? Now, having something in writing that says if the person doesn't do what they've promised, then they will compensate you with a specific dollar amount. Um, There's no guarantee that the person pays you in that case either. But having that document, especially if it's legally drafted and so forth, would would be something that you would be able to take to court or something, right? We do have institutions for enforcing agreements in this country. Um, so if you can't assume goodness, you could still take steps to encourage it. One of the things that I was saying there was we can build trust when we make and keep agreements. So one of the details here is that if you're working towards something, start with the easy stuff first, right? Start with the low risk parts of the agreement before you build onto the things that are more crucial. And then the other part of this strategically is if you know somebody's being self-interested, and I don't want to say being selfish is necessarily evil, but let's just put that in that same category. Somebody is being selfish, they only care about themselves, and they'll back out of whatever at whatever time and hurt other people. They simply don't care as long as it's best for them. You could still work with them as long as you always make agreements that are actually going to be mutually beneficial. This means that if the person backs out of the thing that's doing good for you and it also harms them, they're not likely to back out of that agreement. So there are lots of win-wins, right? We need to make agreements with people in these cases that are win-win, right? If they're not getting something, we don't have any confidence that we're going to get what we want out of it. But as long as they're getting something out of it, the positive relationship can grow and be maintained. And then, so the last take on this is probably the one that's most common in the way we think about it. It's certainly the kind of stuff that we see in Getting to Yes as part of our strategic approach, and that's to say that look, there aren't good people and there aren't bad people. There's only good planning and bad planning. Yeah, because this is all socially constructed. What you think somebody else should do might not be the same as what they think they should do. Right? All of our morality being, bound by subjectivity versus objectivity and so forth. Like, we don't need to worry about judging people. We just need to worry about making good agreements. So if we treat it all this way, right? That all people are capable of doing good and all people are capable of making mistakes, and we stop worrying about judging a person outright as being out to get us or out to help us, then we can craft our agreements from that position where we go through the same kind of steps, we go through the same kind of process, we make sure that we articulate the principles for enforcement. We do all of this with everyone all the time, kind of dot our I's and cross our T's. If you fundamentally feel this way, there are going to be some disadvantages, of course, right? If you think that there's not good people and there's not bad people, you lose the opportunity benefit of treating the people who are genuinely good people, right? There's an opportunity cost of not giving the good people the credit for being good, which would mean that maybe you would be a little bit less cautious and more open for risks. Taking risks is a great behavior when it works out, because it means that you've acted more rapidly, for example, right? Delays have costs and consequences. So you miss out on the opportunities of treating the good people in ways where you benefit from it, but you miss out on, you avoid the risk of treating people better than they deserve to, right? Right? If we confront evil people, and I don't want to get into a lengthy description of, there being genuinely or truly evil people out there, but there's no way to avoid the fact that we read this stuff in the news every day about people whose morality does not fit with what we expect from good behavior. People who are out to get people, con men, right? People who lie, cheat, and steal, right? So if you're not appropriately crediting people who are out to get you, and and cautious about that because you're saying, look, this person's not good or bad. Or if you get conned, right? If the evil person actually convinces you that they're good, um, right? If their lies are convincing, they tell you what you want to hear, which is actually not true, but you fall for it, right? So there are risks. There are risks of getting it wrong, but some of the risks are that we miss out on opportunities, and some of the risks um, are that when we don't give people the credit, right, the negative credit that they've earned, right? Past performance may not be reflective of future behavior, but past performance is frequently very reflective of future behavior, right? People who have lied to you in the past are likely to continue lying, right? They're likely to continue lying until there's an intervention that changes that behavior. Again, so if we want to work on the trust, we start with small agreements. We go with the stuff that's less risky first. When people do what they've promised and we build more trust, then we can increase the amount of risk that we're willing to take with them. That is one strategic way to look at it. Another strategic way to look at it is to say, like, I'm never willing to risk more than I'm actually willing to lose, right? So that even if the person does build their trust, you would never go so far as to trust somebody who's done you wrong in a way that it could actually have a more detrimental impact on your life. So, human nature influences conflict. If we believe people are good, we will treat them differently in conflict. There's strategic ways to think about that, and strategic ways to think about actually being willing to accept an increased level of risk when you believe like somebody's heart is in the right place. And the inverse is also true. If there are people you're just not trusting, and maybe it's not that it's human nature so much as it's human nature says and dictates that people in certain contexts act in certain ways, that you just want to be apprehensive and cautious about what level of risk or how much you're willing to trust or what steps you need to put in place to make sure that you have effective enforcement of agreements, right? And in the US, we might have great enforcement of contractual agreements, especially when we have it written and notarized and all those steps taken. That's not the same everywhere, right? There are different contexts than our own. And if you're in a different context where the person has more freedom to back out of an agreement, yeah, one should be cautious about how much of an impact a betrayal could have. And if we're not going to see people as good, human nature isn't necessarily good, isn't necessarily evil, we can look at this all from like the strategic principle of treat all conflicts the same, use the same system, same structures, same assignment of risk, same calculus about how you're going to evaluate what you're willing to do in a negotiation or otherwise. Hopefully this thinking about human nature is helpful for our broader understanding about conflicts and how we can strategically plan to effectively address them.